Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mayor. This evening, item 8A, David Num from the City Attorney's Office and Fred Baderi from our Community Development Department will present this item, and this is in discussion of continuation of the moratorium we put in place while we study the marijuana issue.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, and honorable members of the council. As the city manager stated, tonight's discussion is on extending the moratorium. Apologize. That the city council placed on any commercial, industrial, or retail cannabis-related land uses, and to prohibit all outdoor cultivation of cannabis. The extension is proposed to continue the adopted effect of the moratorium, and it will provide time for staff to properly analyze and propose ordinances and regulations for the cannabis-related uses. That, as a way of a background, providing background to the events leading up to tonight's discussion would help the public. As we all know, the voters approved AUMA in November of last year, and in response, the state agencies started promulgating draft regulations in early spring of this year. About the middle of summer, Governor Brown approved Senate Bill 94 and then approved the Assembly Bill 133 in September. And based off of those approved legislation, the state agencies repealed their draft regulations, or rather rescinded it, and they are still currently working on trying to figure things out. In response to the changing legal landscape, staff had sought the City Council's direction, and we came and asked City Council on August 22nd whether the City Council wanted to prohibit all cannabis-related uses, initiate a moratorium, or permit it all. At that time, Council had opted to initiate a moratorium and adopted the interim ordinance on September 26th. And Council did so because the new legislation does allow for cannabis, recreational cannabis, and licensing for those land uses will begin on January of next year. So again, this extension does provide time for staff to analyze the draft regulations coming from the state agencies, and for City Council to consider the different options that staff would like to present to City Council without leaving any gaps between our local concerns and what the state will mandate. So there are still many questions that are unanswered, many unknowns, and possibilities related to cannabis-related uses, even at the state level. So staff has been working diligently to find those answers to those questions. Some of the measures that we have taken so far is to follow the enacted legislation and proposed regulations, compare and contrast laws in sister jurisdictions, both locally and through the states. We've been reading case laws and other pertinent publications, advisory memoranda, and so forth, and of course attending conferences, workshops, and other presentations. So in moving forward, staff proposes to bring back different aspects of the cannabis regulation to Council. We anticipate that these topics will take approximately 3 to 4 months in duration to receive direction from Council, through study sessions, to drafting proposed ordinances and regulations, taken to the Planning Commission, and then back to Council for approval. So to the extent that staff can consolidate these topics and to help expedite the process, staff will do so. We propose to start with personal cultivation, as it doesn't require reconciliation with the state's regulations, whatever their draft will be, and certainly since it is permitted at this time. Along with that proposal, we're requesting guidance from the Council where we should start first. whether a permitting process, such as creating a registry and database for city staff to figure out where people are wanting to do home grows, and certainly along with that, to consider fire safety and building regulations, and to what extent council would want to consider any outdoor grows or how we should handle that. We also propose to bring back information to council in regards to future study sessions, starting with general important topics to help frame the issues that the city council will have to face in looking at industrial land uses, agricultural land uses, and commercial land uses. Those important topics would be comprised of taxation, banking, legal issues, and certainly other items that the council would like us to consider. And of course, at future points to also again talk about the industrial land uses, agricultural land uses, which actually we're thinking about combining. So it would be like warehouse grows, and then commercial land uses for retail dispensaries. And so we would do that in accordance with the council's order of preference. And so it's our recommendation that the city council adopt the subject ordinance by roll call, first to approve the report, and then by title only, and by a roll call vote, extend the subject interim ordinance as an urgency measure. The roll call vote is recommended since the ordinance does require a 4/5 vote for passage. And that concludes my presentation. Mr. Buderi and I will be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
Are there any questions, Councilman Hunt?
When you're referring to the permitting process, that's not the people that are having the right to have the 6 plants. That's beyond that? Or is that like right now the state allows you to have, I think it's 6 plants in your house? You're not suggesting that that population has to come down and get permitted first? That population, would they require permitting to do that? Would our ordinance say that you can't have the 6 plants unless you come down and get a permit?
If council so wanted, that would be the process. Certainly that would help us in keeping track, certainly for code enforcement purposes, for planning purposes.
Where other cities have, and is that within the law? I mean, I really wasn't sure that when the voters passed Prop 64 that said you're allowed to have that said that you can require them to. So everybody who has plants in their house would be expected to come apply for a permit, and then they would be permitted to have the plants.
Yes, the law does allow the cities to have certain regulations. What we can't do is completely prohibit it. And so by having a permitting process, we would ensure that, one, the actual grows are being done according to...
Okay, so when you refer to grows, I guess I'm thinking of larger scale grows. I'm not thinking about marijuana as a personal use grow, but you are now thinking that as a personal use, if you decide that you want to personally grow 6 plants, that in Vacaville you'd have to come down and obtain a permit to do that.
That's correct.
That's what, okay. That just doesn't seem like it's in the spirit of what the law was, but I guess that's okay. The other question I have, and I want you to think about when you bring it back, obviously, I'm going to approve this because there's no way I want the state to come in and tell us what to do in November. I mean, we don't have a choice. But I would like to have some evaluation of what some of the revenues are that are being produced. I know we had a presentation from Vallejo, and when it went in, it was terrible because they were chasing around illegal marijuana places, and it was horrible. But once the lieutenant said, once they sort of got it together, and they had 2 or 3 places that they knew about and they worked with, their experience wasn't so bad. Once the legal, I guess that would be medical, because January is when the recreation comes in. But once the legal medical was established, it wasn't nearly as bad, and they did generate a fair amount of revenue. So I think we should at least have that as part of our informed decision to see that. But you know, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to react to the permitting process from a personal grow. I don't know how I feel about having people required to get a permit, you know, to do that. And so, I don't know. All right, thank you.
Mayor Harris.
In regards to next steps, I actually agree with what you've outlined. So I think personal cultivation is probably the low-hanging fruit, if you will. and something that we could probably get through in a reasonable manner. The other items, I think there's still so much that has to be done at the state level that I don't think come January they know exactly what they're going to be doing. So I would rather put off some of these others until there's more information that is usable for making decisions comes forward. So I agree with how you've outlined next steps.
Mashburn.
A couple of things. One, to speak about the permit process for individuals to grow 6 plants in their home. It's my understanding if there's 3 individuals in the house, it's more than 6 plants, it'd be 18 plants, right? It's 6 per.
And that would be actually per residence,
Oh, it's
not
per residence?
resident.
Okay.
So
All right, good.
that would help us
All right.
also maintain.
Because it would be hard to regulate with people with individuals who move around a lot and help others with regard to grows. We run into that a lot out there now with medical marijuana. So understanding that, I still would agree with the permit process. While it's not written into the law that you have to have a permit, it's not written into the Second Amendment that I have to register my weapon and go through a background check, but it's regulated and we do that. So I think that it would be appropriate for us to probably permit marijuana. The second is that I agree with the next steps here, except that I think that we could, low-hanging fruit being personal cultivation, I think we could also move through the retail dispensaries fairly quickly. I think that would be a topic that could be discussed and put to rest fairly quickly with the council as well. So I'd like to move that further up the chart here if no one else has an objection to that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there are a couple other issues that haven't been resolved by the state. Well, several issues, in fact. One of them I know is the fact that there's really no test to determine if anybody's incapacitated when they're driving a car, what the standard is and how you test for it even. Secondly, I don't know of any financial institution in the city of Vacaville, at least, that is opening accounts for people with marijuana. I have no idea about that, but I'm pretty sure there's nobody who's doing it. So you can't bring checks in with, for marijuana use kind of a thing and put them in an account. If they find out, they'll close your account because the only way they're doing it now is cash and carry. That's about it. So there's many issues that the state didn't resolve. It's almost like, pass this thing and we'll find out what's in it later. And so now we're finding out there's a lot of missing parts to the things. And you're absolutely right, the state has not clarified many of them. So I don't know what's going to do. I would certainly think that we need to have a moratorium in the meantime so that the state doesn't take over on the 1st of January. And so I think we're kind of forced into that status. Having said that, I see no further lights, and I'm going to open up for public comment. Anyone wants to address the council on this item about cannabis, please come forward.
I know that Councilman Mashburn seems fairly confident in his reasons for not wanting retail uses, which I would just like to ask again, what specifically is your reason against the retail use?
I have a couple, but I will give you an excellent example that's been in the news just this week. We had a takeover robbery at a CVS pharmacy where 3 individuals with guns came into the pharmacy, jumped over the counter, pointed guns at everybody, loaded bags with drugs, and ran out of the store. So we're talking about opening up stores in Vacaville that are high-volume cash businesses because they have banking issues, and they're going to have a lot of cash on hand, just like a casino, and they're going to have a lot of drugs on hand, just like a pharmacy. And why would we, when there's availability in other areas that are, Dixon's 8 miles up the freeway, Fairfield 9 miles down the freeway, where dispensaries are already in the process of being located, why would we subject the citizens to the Vacaville and our law enforcement personnel and anybody else who might be passing through this city to the possibility that they could be injured, hurt, shot, killed by opening up one of these types of retail consumer outlets. I don't have a problem with the production, totally legal. I don't have a problem with the manufacturing, totally legal. We can enjoy a certain amount of revenue as a city from that. Jobs will be created as a result of that. I don't have a problem with any of that. From the perspective of the distribution of cannabis in food, you're going to have an outlet that sells not just marijuana to be smoked, but in all probability, marijuana in a gummy bear, marijuana in a brownie. I don't really want that out in a neighborhood in the city of Vacaville where my kids might have the opportunity to ingest that if somebody leaves it sitting around. Not that they would, I'm with my kids all the time, but there are many parents that are not. There are parks where kids play. There are things that happen. I just would prefer not to create the opportunity for that to happen. That's my reasoning with regard to a retail outlet in the city.
Okay, I just have two things I would like to point out. Is one, when Councilman Hunt brought this up, was that any store that would be opened would have to have some security on their own dime of their own 24-hour protection, armed security, whatever you guys required. I mean, I think that is something that we could address on a fairly proper level that would not come at the expense of the city of Vacaville, because quite frankly, there's plenty of people who do want to open up these stores and make the money from all these stores. Now, as to the cash only part of it, that is quite honestly a huge problem, and I do agree with you. As for the non-smoked versions of the drug, again, there are going to be dispensaries in Dixon and Fairfield, so those products are going to be around. As for me personally, I hate the smell of the smoke, and I personally don't want it anywhere around me, so I'd prefer people go eat things and so I don't have to smell it. But I do think that trying to limit everything to a personal level opens our city up to a different amount of liability and risk, because we're going to have a lot of people that are just going to grow their own plants, which, okay, fine. And there are people who are going to bend/break the rules. And the illegal sale of drugs is, quite frankly, it's not just that they're around the weed and cannabis products. It's that usually with illegal sales, you're not just having that one particular drug. It's a bunch of other drugs, illegal drugs too. And I think at least separating it out as a legal, safe way to do things, where we can find some way to find some sort of security or some sort of way that we could have tax generating business that actually ends up doing some good for our community. That, you know, quite frankly, there's a lot of weed everywhere, and I just don't see us sweeping it to Dixon or to Fairfield is actually a solution.
Hang on, Vice Mayor Harris.
So I wanted to respond also to your question about the dispensaries. And, you know, honestly, in my mind, why do we need a dispensary if everyone can grow their own marijuana and put it into whatever brownies or teas or smoking it or whatever else? Why is there even a need for dispensaries? We can't tell people that they can't have personal use, and so they're going to have it regardless. Why can't they just do that themselves and not affect the rest of the city, the rest of our residents, the police department, the public works department? I mean, all of our departments are going to be negatively affected by the dispensaries and by the retail component of it. And I don't see the need for it. I just don't flat out see the need for it. If you can have it anyway and you want it, go for it. But don't make it about the city being unfriendly towards business or unfriendly towards tax generation, because that's not who we are.
No, and I don't think I was trying to imply that. I was saying that it is a tax revenue possibility. The other thing I was going to say is that in regards to why would we have a dispensary as opposed to growing it at your house, I mean, why do we have a liquor store as opposed to making it in your bathtub? I mean, some things are just safer. But the other point I will make is that the risks and the liabilities that the city has to deal with when it comes to illegal drugs, they're there. And quite frankly, when it comes to cannabis use as it is already a thing that takes up police officers' time. If there is a legal avenue in knowing where things are, and like Councilman Hunt was saying, that once Vallejo figured out, okay, this is where these are, once you make it into something that is structured and organized, I think it's a little bit easier to control. And that's just my personal opinion, and I think it would be a good thing for us to look into.
Councilman Hunt.
Yeah, I mean, I want to kind of move the conversation on. Eventually, we're going to have a discussion, and there'll be a vote on whether or not we have medical marijuana dispensaries and whether or not we have retail marijuana dispensaries. And it's, you know, it's going to be a discussion about that. But what I wanted to add to the conversation is that you mentioned the smells of marijuana. And whatever we look in, I'd really like to have something in our regulatory about smelling marijuana, because it can be used in so many different ways. And, you know, you think about somebody, you know, playing baseball, and then when they get done, they usually have a beer, and they're sitting around having a beer. What happens if they have marijuana and the whole park smells? I mean, that's going to be a real issue for people. And, you know, I think this conversation is going to take place over the next few months. And I think at some point, like I said 2 weeks ago, we're going to have an up and down vote on dispensaries. And there's going to be some for and some against, and we'll have that discussion. But, you know, I just kind of want to close this that I'm just not a personal advocate for marijuana. I really am not. But when I think the voters vote, I just think we have a responsibility to the democracy to honor their vote. And I wish it hadn't passed. I'll be very clear. I voted against Prop 64. I didn't like it. I voted against it. But the voters voted 53% in Solano County to support it, 53 to 46 in Solano County. So the voters voted for it. And I do think that we need to really look seriously about the intent of that. And I got to tell you, I'm pretty hung up on creating a database and a registry for people who are going to have marijuana in their house. That just seems awfully big brotherish to me. I'm going to have a database, and I'm going to have a registry for everybody who has marijuana in their house. And then the other issue is that, you know, like Councilman Mashburn mentioned, what about if you have a roommate and the one has the permit and the one doesn't, and you go to the house and the one who doesn't have the permit then goes, well, it's not mine. Well, I'm sorry, you're not permitted. I mean, what's the enforcement likelihood of having a database and a registry? So we'll have that discussion, but this permitting process has taken me back a little bit, because I quite frankly didn't think you meant the 6. I thought you meant commercial indoor grows or something. I didn't think you meant the personal use where the state provides everybody the opportunity to have a maximum of 6 plants per household. That wasn't the intent. So I'll deal with that when it comes up. Thank you.
And, you know, the question really is whether we're going to have a moratorium or not. And all the other issues we'll have to discuss in the future. So
I understand, but you guys were also talking about which issues you were going to be looking into, and I really do think that what I was actually trying to ask you for was A, your position, and B, trying to figure out exactly what we would want as a town for to find out what security would actually be required. That sort of thing is kind of where I was going for with the actual next steps.
And I certainly agree with you, but we are talking about the future discussions, because right now we're not. We don't know where we are, and if we say we are, we may change our minds.
No, I know, but you're going to be looking into those particular issues, and I'm just asking that you look into those particular issues.
Thanks a lot. You've been almost a solo out there. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no one, I'm going to close comments from the floor, and I do want to make one comment, and that is, we still don't know what the feds are going to do. I heard on TV today that there's going to be a massive look at all drugs as far as where the United States is in relationship to being a drug culture now. And I don't know what's going to come up with marijuana in the federal jurisdiction. But it is illegal at this point. We need to remember that. Having said that, I'll entertain a motion on whether we have an ordinance or not.
I'll make the motion by roll call vote. Approve report, and by title only, and by roll call vote, extend the subject interim ordinance as an urgency measure.
Second. Okay, now we have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn.
Aye.
Councilmember Rolette.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Augustine.
Aye. Unanimous. Read the title, please.
Urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Vacaville extending the urgency interim ordinance, ordinance number 1916, imposing a moratorium on the approval, commencement, establishment, or operation of all commercial, industrial, and retail cannabis land uses, deliveries, and all outdoor cannabis cultivation.